Thanks for joining STEM Sundays with Emily. We have another fun activity. And before we get started, I just wanted to wish everyone a happy Valentine's Day. Hopefully you got some candy and hopefully we can put it to use today with this activity. So the activity today is candy boring samples. So you might know the word boring, which means for most of you not fun, but that is not what we're doing today. Boring has another meaning, and it actually is used in geology and engineering terms. So a boring that we're going to be talking about today is actually an experiment or a type of test that we do out in nature. So in my case, in bridge engineering, before we even get started on any of the engineering, we need to know what kind of soil are we building on. And in order to find out, we do boring samples. So a boring is taking a tube and drilling it into the soil. So it goes through the grass or the road, depending on where we are, then through all the different types of layers of soil and rock, depending on the site, and we'll use that data to begin our engineering. So everything starts with the type of soil or the type of rock or what type of foundation we're building on. It's going to vary greatly depending on if we're on a weak soil or if we're on a hard rock. That completely changes the way we design the bridge. So in today's case, we're going to be using candy to represent different types of soil and hopefully show you guys some of the different types of soils or rocks or combinations that we deal with out in the field when we're doing bridge projects. So in terms of materials, you're going to need some candy. And I'm sure all the kids out there are cheering. I know when I was younger, I loved candy, so this is a fun one if you have a little bit of a sweet tooth. So feel free to grab any types of candy that you want. This really is a fun experiment to do, and it's all about learning. So different types of candy, different types of fillings, how is that going to work? What layers are you going to find? I thought these would be a great way to introduce 4 different types of soil or rock, but feel free to use anything that you have at home and don't feel like you have to grab these exact types of candy. But for today, I have Reese's cups, yum. I have a Milky Way bar. I have Twix, bam, and KitKat, one of my favorites. So these 4 are going to represent different types of soil, and once we get into the activity, you'll see exactly what I mean by how they're all different. Next, we're going to need some straws. I have to say, this was kind of hard for me to find. I wasn't able to find them at my supermarket, which is probably a good thing for the environment that we can't find plastic straws that easily, but I did have to order these online, and it really is crucial for this activity to be able to see through the straw. So even though paper straws are great for the environment, they're not so great for this activity. I'm trying to think of other ways to do this instead of using a clear plastic straw, and if I think of anything, I'll leave it in the comments or update this video to include that. But for now, I'm going to be using these clear plastic straws. I actually cut mine in half. We don't need to be using this giant straw. I cut mine in half just for the activity. So feel free to do as you wish, but for me, I'll be using clear plastic straws that are a little bit shorter. Also, you're going to need at least 1 per type of candy. So I have 4 straws here that I've cut in half to make small, and it's kind of hard to see since they're clear. But since I have 4 candies, I'm going to need 4 straws, at least 4 straws. Feel free to cut up more straws and try different types of borings in the piece of candy, but I'll be doing 1 boring per candy, so 4 straws. Other than that, a paper plate is probably helpful. I'll just be using that so that I don't dirty up the table with chocolate or any of the other types of fillings here. And if you want to do that on a table or put some newspaper down or a tablecloth, feel free, but easiest for me to use the paper plate. So let's get into the activity. I'm going to be going from weakest type of soil to rock, or the hardest type of soil that we find. So I'll be starting with the Reese's candy. I'll put the other ones to the side, move these big straws out, and we don't need the scissors anymore. So you're gonna open up your Reese's. There we go. Put the wrapper in the garbage. And here we go, singular Reese's cup. I also forgot to mention, you can use the miniature candies if you have them. I knew if I got a miniature bag of candy that I'd probably eat the whole bag. Like I said, I have a sweet tooth too, so feel free to use anything you can get your hands on. For me personally, it was easiest and best for my physical well-being to not have a whole bag of candy sitting around, so that's why I got the single servings at the store. So you'll take the wrapper off. That also can go in the garbage. And we're just going to stick the Reese's right here on the plate. There we go for you to see. Okay, so now we'll take one of our borings, or straws, and press it down into the candy. Now when you do this, think about how much force you're using. Is it going through the candy easy? Is it not? Just keep those things in mind while you're doing this and see what you think about the strongness or how strong or hard the material might be that you're going through. So let's go ahead and press our boring in. Okay, now I'm just gonna kind of wiggle it around so that it's easy to get out. And then I tried this activity a few times and I found it best for viewing the different types and layers of soil if we push through. Perfect. So I just pushed all the way through and I'm lifting the Reese's cup off of the boring, off of the straw. So here we go. Let's clean this up a little bit. Okay, here we go. So as you can see, there are 3 layers. We have a top layer that's very thin, a thick layer in the middle that is deeper than the rest, and then another thin layer. So even though these are made of chocolate and peanut butter, this represents something that you might see out in nature, out in the field. So you have 3 potentially different types of soil. If you wanted to do another test on it, you might be able to distinguish if they're the same types of soil, just different colors. But as you can see here, it was a pretty weak soil. It was very easy to drive through, and you have 3 different layers. I'll try and show you guys a little bit better. So that's one type. It's very easy to drive through. Mostly, I would distinguish this as all soil, no rock. It was very easy to drive through, and we had a couple different layers. Alrighty, so I'm gonna move this Reese's and the corresponding boring off to the side. And let's get out our next type of soil, candy. So next we have a Milky Way. I'll get that out of the wrapper. Alrighty, here we go. Okay, so here is our Milky Way bar. Put the wrapper into the garbage. Okay, so here we go, Milky Way. So let's take our second tube, our second boring, and let's try to drive this one in. I'm gonna go right in here. So for me, the chocolate is a little bit thick, and this is a great example of what you might see if you're trying to, in real life, do this on top of some sort of road or in a parking lot. It might be a little bit tougher to get through that first layer because pavement or asphalt is basically like crushed up rock. So what we're going to do, this is not what would happen probably in the real world because their borings are very strong. Ours are a little bit more weak. I'm going to just lift up this first layer of chocolate so that we can dive a little bit deeper into the other layers. So this is kind of messy, but that's okay. We can get our hands dirty. Okay, so that we're going to say is like a road or parking lot, some type of pavement. So now, once I get this stickiness off me, we'll get our boring again and we'll drive it right through where we just took that chocolate off. And again, I'm going to twist it around, make it a little bit easier, and then lift up the candy bar. Perfect. Here we go, our next boring. So as you can see, 3 layers again, similar to the Reese's. We actually have 4 layers because we weren't able to drive through the very top chocolate. Let me move this so you can see. So we did peel up that chocolate layer on the top so that we could drive through. So if we really wanted to count the total number of layers for this type of soil, this type of candy, we would have the piece of chocolate we removed, that would be layer number 1, and that was very hard. I couldn't even get through it, so I would classify that, like I said, as some sort of pavement, crushed up stone, something very hard to drive through. Now the rest of the layers, as you could see, were very easy to drive through. We could push the straw through very easily. This second layer right here, the caramel layer, was a little bit sticky, but then there also is a third layer, which is a light tan, and that's a different layer, and you could probably feel it as you drove through, that you got through the sticky layer and then it went quickly down to the bottom. So if we were to classify these, we had the top layer of chocolate, which is like the road, then we had a thicker, a little bit hard layer to get through, which is the caramel. Then we have, I don't even know what it's called, mallow, something like that, some sort of marshmallowy type filling. That was our third layer, which was very easy to drive through. And then we have a very thin layer of chocolate at the bottom, which is probably so thin that you couldn't even feel it. But again, similar, it is chocolate, similar to the very top of the candy, so if it had been thicker, it might have been harder for us to drive through. But because it was so thin, very easy. Okay, so I'm gonna put this back and put our Milky Way and our corresponding boring off to the side. Next, we have Twix, another one of my favorites. Let's get out this bar. Garbage. So here we go. And this, a Twix. I'm sure many of you have had it. Let's see what we can count inside. So we're gonna take our boring again, drive it in here. Again, you might be able to see this, but it's a little bit tough for me to get through this first layer of chocolate, but it looks like I'm in now. So let's keep going. And all of a sudden, it feels like I can't go any further. So let's take out the boring. It all stuck in there. So what I'm gonna do is break this in half so we can see the cross section inside of what's going on. Here we go, just broke it in half. So here we can see we have our top layer of chocolate, we have a thin second layer of caramel that you're able to feel if you try driving through, and then we have this really hard layer of cookie. And so this represents something you would see out in nature that is soil, and then all of a sudden you get to a layer of rock. And so our boring wasn't able to go through the cookie or rock because it's so hard. So in the real world, they'd have to get a different type of equipment and drive through the rock because the borings are not strong enough to drill through solid rock. So this is a type of soil that you would see, like I said, where you have soil layers on top, and then all of a sudden it hits a thick, hard layer of solid rock. So in that case, you have to stop your boring, which we did, stopped it, and then you'd have to bring in a different type of equipment to be able to drill through that last layer and get some idea of what kind of rock, the hardness of rock. All of these go into designing whatever type of structure you're building. So that is Twix. Take our empty boring and our Twix bar and put that off to the side. And lastly, we have our KitKat. So this, as you might guess, is going to represent a very special type of soil. So we have our KitKat down here. Put this again off to the side in garbage. Take our last boring, and let's try to see if we can get through this KitKat. For me, not going anywhere. So this is an example of something that is built directly on rock. Could be bedrock, it could be that there was some sort of event that washed away all of the soil layers on top, but there are some cases where you go through and immediately you just hit rock. And in terms of building, that's kind of great because you know your foundation from the very get-go, from the very top, is strong and solid. But in terms of doing borings, not possible. You'd have to get that special piece of equipment out in order to drill through and get a sampling of the rock. But so our KitKat represents total rock, no soil, and like I mentioned, something that is nice for when you're a design engineer trying to build something strong on top of this soil, but isn't always what we find once we get our results back. So those are our 4 types of soil that we're going to talk about today. First, we had our Reese's, which represented just soil layers. You could see a few different layers of soil, different colors. Secondly, we had our Milky Way. So that represented if you already have a road or a parking lot or some sort of pavement, you go through, you have a couple different layers still, all soil underneath. Then we had our Twix bar, which was layers of soil that led to rock, and you couldn't go any further past the 2 layers of soil. And then lastly, we have our KitKat, which is 100% rock. There's no soil in here. You're not getting your boring anywhere through this KitKat. So those are the 4 types, and I hope you learned a little bit. Feel free to go back to the other candies and do some more samples or eat them. Make sure to get your parents or teachers okay first though. And I hope you guys learned a little bit about geology, geotechnical engineering, civil engineering. All of these go together when you're working on a structural engineering project. So next week, our fun activity is going to be building a catapult. So this will be using popsicle sticks, not any giant catapult. It'll just be table size like all of the other activities we've done. But I thought this would be a fun activity for children. And this is another one of those toys that once you build it, you'll be able to use it again and again and again. And I've done this in the past, and kids really love being able to launch things with their homemade catapult. So that'll be next week's activity. I hope you guys enjoyed the bloopers video. I've gotten some really good responses. Everyone's loving it. My cat is a star, what can I say? But thank you guys again for tuning into that. I hope you enjoyed the activity today, and I hope you all have a great Valentine's Day. Enjoy. Thanks again.